It is time for Making Connections, our weekly interview segment. Now, of course, we are in the middle of a pandemic, and it is certainly grabbing all of our attention, and it was out of the blue, unexpected, but there is a greater and known danger to our country and our country's well-being that is beckoning our awareness and action, and that is the issue of a rapidly declining and aging population. Korea is expected to become a super-aged society by 2025, just 4 years away, where those aged 65 or older will make up 1/5 of the total population. And Korea's seniors are also dealing with issues of loneliness, depression, as well as poverty. So our guest today is someone who saw this need and decided to take action. Mike Kim is director of the Asia-Pacific Partnerships at Google and the founder of Korea Legacy Committee, which seeks to mobilize young Koreans to serve the older generations and also raise awareness of the epidemic faced by the so-called forgotten generation. So rather lengthy introduction, but I want to welcome you, Mike Kim, to Life Abroad. Good morning.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Thanks for coming in so early. I know it's pretty early, right? And
No
all
worries.
the way out here as well. But you do have a fascinating story to tell, so we'd like to get to that. But of course, we do like to get to know you on a personal level as well.
Sure.
So I heard that you were born and raised in the Bay Area in the U.S. Aside from the fact that you have a Korean last name, and I imagine that you're a second or third generation Korean, what brought you to Korea?
Yeah, so I was, like as you mentioned, born and raised in the Bay Area.
Okay.
And so I grew up there all my life. And I actually never thought I'd have a chapter in Korea.
Really?
When I first moved here, I couldn't speak Korean at all. I think
Okay.
I knew 3 words.
When was this?
2019.
Just 2 years ago.
I'm sorry, 2014.
14,
Yeah.
okay.
And, I'd been working in Silicon Valley and startups all my life. And all of a sudden, a investor kind of reached out and said, hey, Mike, would you be interested in joining a Korean startup? And at the time, it was tiny. Now it's one of the largest food delivery apps in the country. But that's what brought me out here. And so no one knew it was going to be that big. But I just wanted to try something new. And so, yeah, that one role kind of led me to falling in love with the country. And then 1 year turned into now 6.
2014, was that your first time to Korea? No, right?
I had come to Korea, a couple times in my
Right,
life in the
right.
summers. It was always a week at a time.
Right?
Yeah,
Party,
you
and then,
see
yeah.
your 할머니, your 고모,
Right.
and you're going to 경복궁 and Myeongdong and doing those kind of things. And so I didn't really know much about Seoul, to be honest with you. And so that startup experience really opened my eyes.
Right. When you come here to live, it's it could be a rude awakening call in a way as well, right? Because I remember when I moved back after spending a lot of my time overseas, there's expectations. People look at you, you look Korean, you've got a Korean name, you're expected to act and, speak a certain way.
Sure.
And when you don't actually kind of live up to that, sometimes it can be quite difficult to fit in.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, some of the most basic things like ordering food or going to the bank was all of a sudden difficult. And but you know what? I think it makes you stronger as a person. You got to put yourself out there and challenge yourself. And I was comfortable in the Bay Area, but I want to do something else.
Right.
And so looking back now, I have no regrets. And
Right.
I see myself here now for the long term.
Obviously, you have adjusted very well. You mentioned like 할머니, like when you came to Korea as well.
Yeah.
So is that kind of where the philanthropy and what you're doing now comes from? Or were you interested in it before you came out to to Korea? Because obviously you were in startup in Silicon Valley. Is there
right.
kind of a culture of philanthropy there?
Yeah, so it really, growing up in the Bay Area, my parents always kind of made sure that me and my brother and my sister were aware of our surroundings and our community. And so, growing up in the Bay Area, you have a tech job, you come home, but if you've been to San Francisco, you also know that there's another side.
Of course.
And if you walk through the Tenderloin, you see a completely different society. in a sense.
Tenderloin? There's
Yeah.
an area called Tenderloin?
That's right. There's a neighborhood in San Francisco called the Tenderloin, and it's a rough area.
Oh, sounds yummy, but it's rough
Yeah.
area. Okay.
And actually, where I got my start was there was an organization there called the Glide Foundation. If some of you have watched the movie called The Pursuit of Happiness with Will
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
there's a very famous line there where he's holding his son's hand. They're waiting in line, and someone cuts in front of him. He says,
Right.
"I've been waiting here
Right,
all
right.
day." Well, that's one of the largest soup kitchens in the city. They do 3 meals a day, every single day of the year, even Christmas. And so I started volunteering there very early, middle school, high school. Our teachers would
Middle
take us
school,
out.
very
Our
early.
teachers would take us out on Thanksgiving and Christmas and say, hey, it's time to serve.
Well done.
At that time, it's just something you do with your friends, and it's because your teacher told you to do it.
Exactly. I mean, a lot of students here have to do it. It's kind of required activity.
Right. You don't
but
really
you don't
understand the depth of it.
You don't
and the
put your
meaning.
heart into it. Really.
But I think that's why it's so important that even at that young age to see it. You may not understand why it's important yet, but you see it, and you also at that age could still appreciate when someone else is grateful for that. You could see that.
Yes.
And so when I was there, long story short, they also faced the same issues. Young people weren't serving. And so I had started the Glide Legacy Committee to get young tech people to serve on the weekends because they needed that. When I moved to Korea, it was the same thing. I wanted to volunteer, but I didn't know where. And it was really just by chance. I was at Jamsil Station, and I moved here in the winter. I'm a California kid. I've never had a winter like that. And I still remember there was a harmony sitting on a thin cardboard box.
Inside the station.
Inside the station. And I was cold wearing padding, and I was cold.
Right.
She was just kind of there with a wool blanket selling sticks of gum. And that image was just seared in my mind. And I said, how can we be a country that is so successful and dynamic? And someone in Jamsil Station could be in that position.
Right, because Jamsil, when we know that a lot of homeless people are in Seoul Station, but Jamsil, you think of, big amusement park next door is where people come for their entertainment.
That's right.
It kind of shows the Olympic Park there as well. It kind of shows how much and how far Korea has come. But for you to see this harmony there, I guess that was a big shock to you.
It shocked me, and that's what kicked off kind of my research. And that's when I learned that actually Korea has the highest level of elderly poverty in the world of OECD countries. Nearly half, 48, I think so, almost 50% of the elderly in this country are living below the poverty line, which is just shocking.
Right.
So it is kind of it's a massive issue that we will have to deal with for decades.
Not only that, of course, we're the fastest aging population as well. So 2025, 1/5 of the entire population will be 65 or older. And most of us, luckily, will also grow old. So it's a problem that we can't escape, right?
Absolutely.
But I was just wondering, though, like you said, when you came to Korea, you would visit your harmony as well. I mean, we know this problem. I think we've heard about it in the news as well. But what do you think? Why are they called the forgotten generation? Because obviously they have done so much to raise our country to where it is now, to make sure that we get educated as well. But why do you think they're the forgotten generation? Why has it come to this? I know it's a big question, but what are your personal thoughts?
I don't know the right answer. I think just my personal thoughts are, we're such a forward-looking country.
Yes.
whenever there's a trend,
빨리 앞으로.
or if there's some new app, everyone jumps on it. We're always looking forward at the next thing. And I think in some sense, that's wonderful. I mean, we're always looking for how to grow and move into the future. In one sense, though, it also means that we don't take the time to sometimes look back and think of, okay, there was a lot of construction, there was a lot of growth, but because of that, there are some side effects. And like you mentioned, the generation that built this country is the one that is suffering. You don't go to many countries where you can still see the generation that built the country. You can't go to America and say, which generation built that?
Right.
The Carnegies and the old generation is gone. This one, the people who built the bridges, the companies that create jobs now, they exist. But they're also at the tail end of not being able to, accept the benefits of the growth of the country. The pension system wasn't there before them. There wasn't a generation before them to pay taxes to support them. So that just means the ultimate responsibility to support them then is us.
Right. And us can mean you and I, and of course, it could also mean the government. And obviously, we kind of have to work together.
That's right.
It's a huge problem, and it can't just be tackled by the young people. But so there are, of course, many, many fronts that we need to work on. What did you think that you can do, and what did you do about that?
You're right. I mean, there's so many things that we need to do, whether it's job training or housing, but the one thing that the Korea Legacy Committee focuses on is meals.
Okay.
That is the most basic human right. If anyone, the most rich man in the world, if he goes a week without a meal, he's not going to be a happy person. He probably can't do the things he's good at. And so before we start doing anything else, job training or supporting them with other things, we have to make sure every elderly citizen in this country has a meal and that they don't go hungry.
Okay.
We're not a country that doesn't have food. We have plenty of food. We just need to make sure that it gets to the right folks.
So tell us now about the Korea Legacy. How did you come about to bring it, to set it up? When did you set it up?
So really, honestly, it was just a small group of friends who said, hey, let's just kind of volunteer at a center.
Just not your work friends?
No,
or just your private friends? Okay.
Just some five. But I think it started with 5 or 6 friends.
Pretty big name, though, the Korea Legacy Committee, I have to say. Was this your idea?
The reason we had called it that is the term legacy means it's got to be something greater than you, meaning that when I'm long gone from this earth, the movement, and we called the Korea Legacy Committee a movement, meaning that there should be generations after us doing this work. And so to get to your question, we basically, a small group of friends would go volunteer, kind of do a soup kitchen, and then they would tell us, hey, we need more volunteers. And so I said, okay, we'll recruit.
Right.
So then we had a few more friends. And what we realized was there was actually an appetite from young people to want to give.
Yes.
They just didn't know where and how, the platform.
I think that's the common question or the problem facing a lot of people. They want to help, they want to do something, but they don't know exactly where to go. There are the big organizations, but sometimes it doesn't appeal to them.
That's right.
Maybe there's too many steps to take as well. How did you recruit these people then?
These are just friends of friends.
Okay.
And but like you had mentioned, there's not a lot of opportunities for just young people to join an organization built by young people.
Right.
This is a movement that isn't from some large corporation. It isn't government funded. This is really young people putting $5, $10 together, making it into a larger sum, buying the toshiraks and giving it out. And now we are starting to expand to 대학지부, so college chapters, because we also, like we said, the word legacy, it's important to bestow this culture onto the next generation.
Right.
And so we're excited to see the growth of our college chapters.
Well, I think a lot of people are excited to hear about your initiative, including our listeners. So I just want to read out a couple of messages that we got during our interview from 2311 saying, what you're doing is amazing. Taking that kind of initiative, especially as a second-generation immigrant, is not easy. That does kind of actually, I was wondering, did you find it harder to sort of take this initiative and to continue it because you, obviously you're an Korean American, but because you're not from here, was there any sort of cultural or language barriers?
What was interesting is because I had done the Glide Legacy Committee in America, I will say that actually coming here, and like I said, when I saw that Hanguk harmony, what's different is when I see poverty in America, it still pains me. But when I see it as a Hanguk harmony,
yes,
I actually see my harmony. And that's very different.
It is.
And maybe it's because of our race, but I'm still a Kim.
Of course.
And when I see a Hanguk 할아버지 or harmony suffering, it just hits me much more deeper because it feels like my own. And so I think that's what, it wasn't difficult as an immigrant or a second generation.
It wasn't difficult to organize or to mobilize.
In fact, I think it
out.
fires me up more.
Okay.
Because it's much more relatable.
Another message from 8622 saying, thank you for featuring this topic close to my heart. I've done a bit of volunteering in a soup kitchen here a couple of years ago, pre-COVID. Is it possible to do this in the COVID time now, without risk to the older people's health, waiting for the vaccine, and we'll look into it again in the near future? Exactly my same question, because I was also taking part in a soup kitchen in Jongno. And basically for the past year, it has been on and off, more off than on, and just handing out of toshiraks. How have you been able to cope?
Yeah, it's been a challenge. We also want to keep our KLC family safe and our volunteers safe.
Right.
But we also, this is the irony, is that when things get bad, when the cases rise, the people who are most vulnerable, who need those spaces, they don't.
There are more people coming to the soup kitchens, right? I had heard that.
Because the soup kitchens closed, and then that was their responsibility. So what we've done is we've worked with our team to make sure, we limit the number of volunteers. So if we used to have 20 or 25 every weekend, now it's maybe 5 or 6. We also make sure we rotate them. And then also, we used to do seated meals at the soup kitchen. We no longer do that. We only hand out toshiraks outside, boxes, and they space themselves out. So, we're trying our best, but one thing is for sure, we cannot stop the work because of the pandemic. Right. In fact, we have to do more because when, as you had mentioned, these places shut down, they have no meal.
Exactly. How do you get these young people on board? I mean, obviously, you started out with friends and friends of friends, and you said there is this great interest. At the same time, I think people can also be kind of skeptical and think that there's this generation gap between the young, especially the older, here in Korea. I know my mom sort of half jokingly, I think she said, among her friends, there's this kind of belief that, you actually need money to get hyo or to be respected and treated well by your children as well. So for young people who are faced with their own problems, unemployment, housing problems, for them to reach out with their own time and money to these elderly people that they may not know, how do you get them on board? What's in it for them, Mike?
That's a great question. And one of the things, when we create a KLC 대학집 or a college chapter, they have to go through an 8-week leadership training.
8 weeks?
8 weeks. So every Saturday they're coming out and we're teaching them how to fundraise, how to mobilize, just like it was a grassroots campaign. And I actually also ask, this is a lot. And they say, well, we just want to find some kind of meaning.
I think that's the common goal, right?
I think that if you look at the surface, people think that this generation is kind of shallow because all they're doing is dancing in front of a camera. But if you scrape it below, what that really is saying is they're trying to find some type of meaning or validation. And we're saying, look, you could either sit in front of a camera and dance. That's cool. Or what you really want to find is, hey, every single day I may not be the richest person in the room, or I may not have, the top university on my resume,
right,
but I still matter in this country. And that's why our Leadership Academy is about building young leaders. My ultimate goal is, look, if you join KLC for a couple of years and you help the fight on elderly poverty, cool. But in 2 years you leave and you learn some tools to build your own movement, to take Korea to the next chapter, that's it. And 10 years, 20 years from now, my goal is hopefully young leaders have come out of the KLC Leadership Academy. They're running for office. They're, fundraising for their own movements. And I think people are going to be very proud of this young generation because of the fact that our elderly has pushed us this far.
That would be the proudest legacy, I think, of all, right?
That's the goal.
Growing that younger generation.
Yeah.
I think a lot of our listeners are curious to know how they can volunteer, how they can contribute to the Korea legacy as well. Like 0137 said, please let us know how we could volunteer.
Awesome. So the easiest way is 2 things. One is our website, korealegacy.com. And there either you can donate, which the donations go to the Toshidaks, or you can volunteer, and there's a calendar, so you can schedule that. Or our Instagram, which is @KoreaLegacy. So we always post our monthly volunteer schedules. And if you see that, you can see, this Saturday I want to go out and what location, and is a simple registration link. We are limiting the number, so it's a little bit, the slots aren't as much.
Okay.
But hopefully later in the year, if things get better with the pandemic, we'll open up more slots.
When you say volunteer, do you have to go through training?
No.
A couple of weeks training for volunteering?
Open for everyone. And in fact, we recently had a lot of families come out. I was surprised. Well, we had a father with, I think, a 6-7-year-old son come out. And, I thought that maybe they'd be scared to do that. But he did. And he now is they come out together all the time.
I think that's the best part about donation and the culture of volunteering as well. When you're able to share it with your young children, that again sets them up like it did with you as well.
Absolutely.
It builds family rapport as well, but it shows them and it kind of learns the values as well.
That's right.
So are there any maybe last message or something that you'd like to tell our listeners before we wrap up the interview?
I guess it's just more, I've always wanted to say that this is more so than a charity organization or a nonprofit, this is a movement. And so it is a completely open movement as well, meaning you don't need to think that you need to come from a certain background, a particular education, or a neighborhood.
Or have a certain amount of money.
Nothing. This is completely open, unapologetically saying, our door is open. And so if you want to come meet other like-minded people who want to give, the ultimate thing that I love seeing is after volunteering, I see 2 people who have never met before. They go out and they grab a coffee. The next weekend I see them, they're best friends. And you know what? That's exactly what this movement is about. Finding people who are in your tribe that believe in what you believe in, but ultimately building out your own family of friends. And so if you are interested, please join. Please follow our website, and we'll see you out there.
Korea Legacy. .com?
KoreaLegacy.com.
All right. Thank you very much, Mike
Thank you
Kim,
so
for
much.
coming in and sharing your story.
Appreciate it.